The clock on the dashboard read 11:43 p.m. David Chun sat in his beat-up Ford pickup, parked under the harsh fluorescent lights of a Shell station on the outskirts of Phoenix, Arizona. His hands were shaking, not from cold, but from exhaustion and the bitter reality of counting the same crumpled bills for the fourth time. $17.32. That was all that stood between him and an empty gas tank, between making it to tomorrow's construction site or losing the only job keeping him and his daughter afloat. "Please be enough," he whispered, sliding his debit card into the pump reader. The screen flashed. Declined. David's stomach dropped. He tried again. Declined. Of course. The overdraft protection had finally run out. He stared at the cash in his hand. Just enough for gas to get to work, but not enough to also buy the medication his daughter Emma needed for her asthma. The prescription had cost more than he'd expected, and now he was paying for that choice. He was about to pump what little gas $17 could buy when he heard it. Sobbing. Deep, wrenching sobs that cut through the desert night like broken glass. David turned toward the sound. Near the air pump, sitting on the curb with her head in her hands, was a woman. Even in the dim light, everything about her screamed wealth. The designer coat, the perfect manicure, the Audi Q7 parked behind her with its engine still running. Around them, other late-night customers hurried past. A businessman on his phone, a college student with headphones, a truck driver checking his tires. All of them saw her. None of them stopped. David looked at his gas pump, then at the woman, then at his watch. He had a 6 a.m. shift. He needed to get home, get 4 hours of sleep, and be functional enough to operate heavy machinery without killing himself or anyone else. But something in those sobs reached into his chest and squeezed. His own mother had cried like that 2 years ago when the cancer diagnosis came, when she'd sat in her kitchen and broken apart because she knew she'd be leaving David alone with a 7-year-old to raise by himself. David's feet carried him across the parking lot before his brain could talk him out of it. "Excuse me, ma'am?" His voice was rough from exhaustion but gentle. "Are you all right?" The woman's head snapped up. She was in her mid-50s, David guessed, with auburn hair that had probably been styled that morning but now hung loose and disheveled. Her makeup was ruined by tears, creating dark tracks down her face. And her eyes, God, her eyes looked like someone had reached in and turned off all the lights. She started to wave him away, then stopped. Her shoulders sagged. No, I'm not all right." David lowered himself onto the curb beside her, his work boots scraping against the concrete. His knees protested, 36 years old, and his body already felt ancient from years of manual labor. "I'm David," he said simply. "Victoria." Her voice was hollow. "Victoria Ashford." They sat in silence for a moment. A warm desert wind carried the smell of gasoline and sage. In the distance, Phoenix's lights created an orange glow against the night sky. "My son died yesterday," Victoria said suddenly, the words tumbling out like she couldn't hold them in anymore. "The funeral was this morning. Everyone kept telling me they were sorry, that they understood, that time heals all wounds." She laughed bitterly. "But they don't understand. Nobody understands." David felt his throat tighten. "I'm so sorry for your loss." He was 26. Victoria's hands clenched into fists. Alexander. He was a doctor, just finished his residency in pediatric oncology. He wanted to cure childhood cancer. Her voice broke. He spent 3 years of medical school volunteering at children's hospitals. He'd read to the kids, play games with them, make them laugh when they felt like they had nothing to laugh about. "He sounds like he was an incredible person," David said quietly. "He was everything." The tears came harder now. "My husband died 8 years ago. Heart attack. Alexander was all I had left. And now..." She couldn't finish the sentence. David didn't try to fill the silence with empty platitudes. He'd learned, during his mother's illness, that sometimes the kindest thing you could do was just sit with someone in their pain. "How did it happen?" he asked gently. "If you don't mind me asking." Victoria took a shuddering breath. "Car accident. He was driving home from a 30-hour shift at the hospital. They think he fell asleep at the wheel. Hit a concrete barrier on the I-10. She looked at David with eyes that held an ocean of guilt. "He texted me that night. Said he was exhausted. Asked if I'd come pick him up. I was at a charity gala. I told him to just drive carefully, that I couldn't leave." "Victoria, if I had just left that stupid party, he'd still be alive." The words came out in a rush of anguish. "I chose champagne and small talk over my son's life." David reached into his worn leather wallet and pulled out a photo. A little girl with pigtails and a gap-toothed smile, holding up a crayon drawing of what might have been a dragon or possibly a dog. It was hard to tell. "This is Emma," he said, handing Victoria the photo. "She's 9 years old, smart as a whip, stubborn as a mule, and the reason I get up every morning." Victoria took the photo with trembling hands, studying the child's happy face. "Where's her mother?" she asked. David's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Addiction. Opioids started after a back injury. Got worse over 3 years. She left when Emma was 4. Said she couldn't be the mother we needed her to be. Last I heard, she was in rehab somewhere in California. That was 2 years ago. So it's just the two of you?" "Just us." David took the photo back carefully. "I work construction 60 hours a week. My mom used to watch Emma after school. But then," he paused, "cancer took her 18 months ago. Now Emma goes to an after-school program that costs more than I make in a day. But it's worth it because she's safe and supervised." Victoria wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, mascara smearing further. "You look exhausted." "2 jobs," David admitted. "Construction during the day, security guard at a warehouse 3 nights a week. Emma's got asthma, and the medications aren't cheap. Neither is rent in Phoenix." He managed a tired smile. "But we're making it work. She's happy, she's healthy, and she's going to have opportunities one never had." "What kind of opportunities?" "She wants to be a marine biologist." David's face lit up when he talked about his daughter. Obsessed with ocean life, has posters of different fish species all over her room, watches documentaries about coral reefs, can tell you the scientific name of probably 50 different types of sharks. "That's impressive. She's been asking me for 3 years if we can visit the Monterey Bay Aquarium." David's smile faded slightly. "I keep telling her someday, but someday feels like it never comes. Between bills and her medication and just keeping us afloat, there's nothing left for dreams like that." Victoria was quiet for a long moment, studying this tired, kind man who'd stopped his own difficult evening to comfort a stranger. "What were you doing here tonight?" she asked. "At a gas station at midnight on a Tuesday? Getting gas to make it to work tomorrow." David gestured toward his truck. "Was actually trying to decide between enough fuel to get to the job site or buying Emma's inhaler refill. Can't afford both this week." The simple honesty of the statement hit Victoria like a physical blow. Here she sat, a woman with more money than she could spend in 3 lifetimes, drowning in grief and guilt. And beside her sat a man who was choosing between transportation and his daughter's medication, yet he'd still stopped to check on her. "What did you choose?" Victoria asked quietly. "The inhaler. I'll figure out the gas situation tomorrow. Maybe ask the foreman for an advance, though I hate doing that." David checked his watch and stood up, brushing off his jeans. "I should let you get home. Are you okay to drive?" "I don't know where home is anymore," Victoria said, the words slipping out before she could stop them. "Alexander and I lived together. That house is full of him. His medical books, his running shoes by the door, his coffee mug still in the sink from the morning he—" She couldn't finish. David knelt back down, meeting her eyes. "Victoria, I'm going to be straight with you because I think you need to hear this. What happened to Alexander wasn't your fault. You didn't cause that accident. You're not responsible for his exhaustion or his decision to drive or the concrete barrier being in that exact spot. But I could have prevented it. You couldn't have known. David's voice was firm but gentle. When my mom got her diagnosis, I spent months torturing myself with what-ifs. What if I'd noticed the symptoms earlier? What if I'd insisted she see a specialist sooner? What if I'd been a better son? He shook his head. But that kind of thinking is poison, Victoria. It doesn't honor their memory. It just destroys us from the inside out. How did you stop? Victoria whispered. How did you learn to live with it? I looked at Emma. David's voice grew softer. And I realized that the best way to honor my mom's memory wasn't to drown in guilt. It was to be the father she raised me to be. To show Emma that even when life breaks you, you can put yourself back together and keep loving people. Victoria stared at him, tears streaming silently down her face. Alexander used to say something similar. He'd tell his patients' parents that the best way to honor their sick children was to keep finding joy, keep creating beautiful moments, because that's what the kids would want for them. He sounds like he was a wise man. He was wise beyond his years. Victoria managed a small smile through her tears. He got that from his father. James was the same way, always seeing the bigger picture, always focused on what mattered. They talked for another hour. Victoria told David about Alexander's childhood, how he'd insisted on setting up a lemonade stand at age 7 and donating all the proceeds to cancer research, how he'd volunteered at animal shelters every weekend during high school, how he'd called her every single day during medical school, no matter how busy he was, just to check in. David shared stories about Emma's obsession with the ocean, how she'd created an entire research notebook with drawings and facts about marine life, how she talked about swimming with dolphins like other kids talked about meeting their favorite celebrities, how she'd told him last week that when she became a marine biologist, she'd name a new species of fish after him. She sounds wonderful, Victoria said, genuine warmth in her voice for the first time that evening. She's my whole world, David replied simply. As the night grew later and the gas station quieter, Victoria finally stood up. Her legs were stiff from sitting on the concrete, and David offered her a hand to help her rise. Thank you, she said, and the words carried more weight than simple gratitude. I came here tonight planning to... She stopped, but David understood what she couldn't say. I'm glad you're still here, he said quietly. Victoria opened her designer purse and pulled out a business card. This is my attorney, Robert Chin. I want you to call him tomorrow morning. David took the card uncertainly. Ma'am, I appreciate the thought, but I'm not sure what I'd need with a lawyer. Just call him, Victoria interrupted gently. Please, tell him Victoria Ashford sent you. Tell him about Emma and her dreams of marine biology. I don't understand. You will. Victoria placed her hand on his arm. David, tonight you gave me something I thought I'd lost forever. You gave me hope that there's still goodness in this world. That Alexander's belief in human compassion wasn't naive. Her voice grew stronger. Let me give you something in return. Please. Something in her tone made David nod, though confusion was written all over his face. Okay, I'll call him. Promise. I promise. They stood in the parking lot for another moment, two souls who'd found each other in darkness and somehow created light. Drive safe, David said. And Victoria? Alexander would be proud of you for still being here, for fighting to keep going. Don't waste that courage. As Victoria drove away in her Audi, David watched her taillights disappear into the Phoenix night. He looked at the business card in his hand, then at his truck, then at the gas pump. With the last of his cash, he pumped $17 worth of gas into his tank. It wouldn't be enough to get him through the week, but it would get him to work tomorrow. He'd figure out the rest somehow. He always did. David's alarm went off at 5:30 a.m., its shrill beeping cutting through dreams of Monterey Bay Aquarium and impossible philanthropists. He groaned, slapped the clock into silence, and lay there for a moment, staring at the water-stained ceiling of their small apartment. Had last night really happened? He reached for his wallet on the nightstand and pulled out the business card. Robert Chun, attorney at law. The card was real, at least. Heavy cardstock, embossed lettering, the kind of thing that cost more than his entire wallet. "Daddy." Emma's sleepy voice came from the doorway. She was wearing her favorite pajamas, covered in sea turtles, and clutching the stuffed dolphin she'd had since she was 3. "Hey, Jelly Bean." David sat up, making room for her on the bed. "What are you doing up so early? I heard your alarm. Can I have pancakes for breakfast?" David did the mental math. Pancakes would use up the last of their pancake mix, but Emma's face when he made them was worth any price. "Sure thing. Go brush your teeth, and I'll get started." As Emma scampered off to the bathroom, David looked at the business card again. Victoria had been so insistent that he call. What could a lawyer possibly want with him? The pancakes were cooking on their ancient electric stove when his phone rang. Unknown number. David almost didn't answer. Probably a spam call about his car's extended warranty. But something made him pick up. "Is this David Chun?" "Speaking. Who's this?" "My name is Robert Chun, no relation, I assume." The voice was warm, professional, tinged with humor. "I represent Victoria Ashford. She called me at 6 this morning, which I normally wouldn't appreciate, but in this case, I'll make an exception." David nearly dropped the spatula. "She called you about me?" "Indeed. I have to say, Mr. Chun, in 25 years of practicing law, I've never had a client quite so insistent that I clear my morning schedule for an emergency meeting." There was a pause. "Would it be possible for you to come to my office at 9 a.m.? I understand you have work, but Mrs. Ashford has made arrangements. She's already contacted your employer to explain that you'll be late due to a family emergency." "She did what?" "She can be quite persuasive when she wants to be," Robert said, and David could hear the smile in his voice. "I promise this will be worth your time. My office is at—" "I have a 9-year-old daughter," David interrupted. "I can't just leave her. Bring her." Mrs. Ashford specifically mentioned that Emma should be present for this conversation. After he hung up, David stood in his tiny kitchen, staring at the phone like it might suddenly make sense of the last 12 hours. Emma returned, her hair sticking up in multiple directions, toothpaste foam still at the corner of her mouth. "Who was that, Daddy?" "A lawyer." David flipped the pancakes. "We're going to visit his office this morning before school." Emma's eyes widened. "Are we in trouble?" "No, baby. I think—" David paused, not sure how to explain something he didn't understand himself. "I think something really good might be happening, but I don't know what yet." Robert Chen's office was located in downtown Phoenix, on the 15th floor of a gleaming glass tower that made David's truck look even more out of place in the parking garage. Emma pressed her nose against the elevator window as they ascended, watching the city shrink below them. "We're so high up," she breathed. The reception area was all polished wood and leather furniture. A kind-faced woman at the desk smiled at them. "Mr. Chun? Mr. Chun is expecting you. Right this way." Robert Chun was a distinguished man in his early 60s, with silver hair and glasses that gave him a professorial air. He stood up from behind a massive mahogany desk, extending his hand with a warm smile. "David, Emma, thank you for coming on such short notice." He gestured to comfortable chairs. "Please sit." Emma clutched her dolphin tightly, looking around the office with wide eyes. David noticed she was taking in the aquarium in the corner, a large saltwater tank with tropical fish darting between coral formations. "That's a powder blue tang," Emma said suddenly, pointing. "Acantharus leucosternin. They're from the Indian Ocean." Robert's eyebrows rose. "You know your fish." "I'm going to be a marine biologist," Emma said with the absolute certainty only a 9-year-old could muster. I have no doubt you will be. Robert opened a folder on his desk. David, I'm going to be direct because I think you appreciate straightforwardness. Victoria Ashford spent 3 hours on the phone with me this morning. She told me about meeting you last night, about your conversation, about your daughter's dreams. David shifted uncomfortably. Sir, if this is about charity, it's not charity. Robert's voice was firm. It's investment. Mrs. Ashford believes strongly in supporting families who demonstrate both genuine need and exceptional character. She's convinced that you and Emma represent exactly what she's looking for. He slid a document across the desk. This is the Alexander Ashford Memorial Scholarship. It was established yesterday, mere hours after Mrs. Ashford met you. It provides full academic support for one exceptional student with demonstrated need and interest in medical or scientific fields. David stared at the paper, the words swimming before his eyes. I don't understand. Emma, Robert said, turning to the little girl, would you like to go to a school with a marine biology program? One with field trips to the ocean science labs, maybe even summer camps where you could work with real marine biologists. Emma's mouth fell open. Really? Really? Robert smiled. Mrs. Ashford has arranged for you to attend Desert Sky Academy, one of the finest preparatory schools in Arizona. They have partnerships with the Monterey Bay Aquarium, UC San Diego's Scripps Institution of Oceanography, and several marine research facilities. Full scholarship, everything included. This is insane, David whispered. We met her once, for an hour. She doesn't even know us. On the contrary, Robert leaned back in his chair. She knows that you stopped to help a grieving stranger when you had every reason to focus on your own problems. She knows you chose your daughter's medication over your own needs. She knows you're raising a bright, curious child who dreams of making the world better. He paused. She also knows that her son would have done exactly what you did last night, and that means everything to her. But there's more. Robert pulled out another set of documents. Mrs. Ashford has also established a trust fund for Emma's future education, undergraduate, graduate school, anything she needs to pursue her dreams of marine biology. She's also arranged for a housing grant to relocate you both to a more stable living situation. David felt like the room was spinning. A housing grant? She's purchased a property in Scottsdale. 3 bedrooms, fully furnished, near Emma's new school. The deed will be in your name, no mortgage. No. David stood up abruptly. No, this is too much. I can't accept this. I helped her because it was the right thing to do, not because I wanted. I know that, Robert interrupted gently. So does Victoria. That's exactly why she wants to do this. He stood as well, moving around the desk. David, Victoria told me something this morning that I think you need to hear. Last night, when you found her at that gas station, she wasn't just grieving. She was planning to drive her car into the desert and disappear. The words hit David like a punch to the gut. Emma, not fully understanding but sensing the gravity, clutched her dolphin tighter. You saved her life, Robert continued quietly. Not just by talking to her, but by showing her that there's still goodness in the world. That Alexander's faith in humanity wasn't misplaced. You gave her a reason to keep living. David sank back into his chair, overwhelmed. She wants to honor her son's memory by helping people. Specifically, by investing in children like Emma who have big dreams and parents like you who'd move mountains to make those dreams possible. Robert returned to his desk. This isn't charity, David. This is Victoria choosing to transform her grief into something beautiful. Please don't take that away from her. The house in Scottsdale was beyond anything David had imagined. Single-story adobe-style home with a courtyard entrance, surrounded by desert landscaping and Palo Verde trees. Emma's room had large windows overlooking the McDowell Mountains and, Victoria's specific request, bookshelves waiting to be filled with marine biology texts. But it was the pool that made Emma scream with delight. "Daddy, we have a pool. I can practice swimming. Marine biologists need to be good swimmers." David stood in the courtyard, still trying to process how his life had transformed in less than a week. The moving truck, which Victoria had arranged and paid for, was being unloaded by professionals, also arranged and paid for. Their meager possessions looked lost in the spacious rooms. "It's a bit overwhelming, isn't it?" David turned to find Victoria standing in the driveway, wearing jeans and a simple blouse, looking more put together than that night at the gas station but still carrying shadows of grief in her eyes. "Victoria." David moved toward her. "I don't know how to thank you. It's healing," Victoria interrupted gently. "For both of us." She looked around the property. "Alexander and I looked at this house when it first came on the market. He loved the mountains, the open sky. I'd forgotten about it until my realtor mentioned it was available again." Emma came running from the backyard, still in her school clothes, hair wild from excitement. "Are you Miss Victoria? The lady who's helping us?" "I am." Victoria knelt down to Emma's level. "And you must be the future marine biologist I've heard so much about. Daddy says you knew someone who wanted to help people too." Victoria's breath caught slightly, but she smiled. "I did. My son Alexander. He was a doctor who took care of sick children. Daddy says he was very brave. He was the bravest person I knew." Victoria's voice was thick with emotion. "Would you like to hear about him?" They sat on the courtyard wall while Victoria told Emma about Alexander. How he'd wanted to be a doctor since he was 8 years old. How he'd volunteered at hospitals as a teenager. How he'd spent his entire medical residency focused on making scared kids smile. "He sounds like he was a really good person," Emma said solemnly. "He was. And I think he would have really liked you." Victoria pulled something from her bag. A photograph of a young man in a white coat, smiling at the camera, a stethoscope around his neck. This was Alexander at his first day as a doctor. "I want you to have it." Emma took the photo carefully. Really? I think he'd want to be part of your journey to becoming a scientist. Maybe you could keep it in your room, as a reminder that there are people who believe in your dreams." Over the next few months, Victoria became a regular presence in their lives. She attended Emma's science fair. Emma's project on coral reef ecosystems won first place. She arranged for Emma to do a video call with an actual marine biologist at Scripps. She simply showed up sometimes with dinner, not wanting to eat alone in her big empty house. And slowly, both of them, Victoria and David, began to heal. One evening, after Emma had gone to bed, David and Victoria sat in the courtyard, watching the stars emerge over the desert. "Can I ask you something?" David said quietly. "Anything. Why did you really do all this? I mean, I understand about Alexander and wanting to honor his memory. But this," he gestured at the house, "this is more than just a scholarship. You've basically adopted us." Victoria was quiet for a long moment. "That night at the gas station, I had decided to end my life. I'd written letters, made arrangements, said goodbye to Alexander's grave. I was done." David's chest tightened, but he didn't interrupt. And then this exhausted, struggling father stopped to check on a crying stranger. "You had every excuse to keep walking. You were broke, you were worried about your daughter, you had work in the morning. But you stopped anyway." She turned to look at him, tears in her eyes. "You reminded me that Alexander was right. That kindness still exists. That human connection still matters. You saved my life, David." "Victoria, let me finish." She wiped her eyes. "I have more money than I could spend in 10 lifetimes. Beautiful houses, expensive cars, prestigious charity board positions. But none of it meant anything anymore. I felt hollow." She looked at the house, where Emma's bedroom light had finally turned off. But watching Emma light up when she talks about dolphins, seeing her devour those marine biology books, hearing her excited chatter about swimming with sharks someday, that gives me purpose again. "You've given us everything. David said, his voice rough with emotion. No. Victoria shook her head. You gave me everything first. You gave me a reason to keep living. Everything else is just, she smiled through tears. Just me trying to say thank you in the only way I know how. The Monterey Bay Aquarium was everything Emma had dreamed it would be and more. She pressed her face against the glass of the kelp forest exhibit, watching leopard sharks glide past like shadows. Look, Daddy, that's a 7-gill shark. Notorhynchus sepedianus. They're really rare. David smiled, watching his daughter's joy with a fullness in his chest he couldn't quite describe. Victoria stood beside him, her hand resting lightly on his shoulder. Alexander would have loved this, she said softly. I wish he could have met her, David replied. They would have gotten along. I think they're meeting right now, in a way. Victoria smiled. Every time Emma helps another kid understand ocean ecosystems, every time she talks about her dreams of protecting marine life, that's Alexander's legacy continuing. That's the ripple effect of compassion. They'd come to Monterey for Emma's 11th birthday, her reward for maintaining straight A's at Desert Sky Academy. But it was more than just a trip. Emma was enrolled in a week-long youth marine biology camp at the aquarium, working alongside actual researchers. As they walked through the exhibits, David thought about that night at the gas station 2 years ago. How counting $17 had felt like the lowest point of his life. How he'd almost talked himself out of stopping to help a crying stranger. Do you ever think about that night? Victoria asked, as if reading his thoughts. Every day, David admitted. Everything changed because I walked 20 feet across a parking lot. That's the thing about kindness, Victoria said. We never know which small act will change everything. Alexander used to say that every patient interaction mattered. Even just a smile in the hallway could be the thing that gave someone hope to keep fighting. Emma came running back to them, her eyes shining. They have an internship program for high school students. Can I apply when I'm older? Please. We'll figure it out, David promised, pulling her into a hug. That evening, they had dinner at a restaurant overlooking the bay. The sun was setting, painting the water in shades of gold and pink. Emma was sketching otters in her journal. Victoria was sharing stories about Alexander's childhood love of the beach. And David sat there, surrounded by his small, unexpected family, and marveled at how one moment of choosing kindness had created this. Thank you, he said to Victoria, his voice quiet enough that Emma couldn't hear. For what? For stopping at that gas station. For being there that night. For trusting me when I said you weren't alone. He smiled. For becoming family. Victoria's eyes filled with tears, but they were happy tears now. Thank you for saving my life in every way that counts. For giving me purpose again. For letting me be part of Emma's journey. She raised her glass. To Alexander. To second chances. To the unexpected family we build from broken pieces. David clinked his glass against hers. To kindness that changes everything. As the sun dipped below the horizon and Emma excitedly explained the difference between harbor seals and sea lions, David realized something profound. The world was full of moments like that night at the gas station. Moments where one choice, to stop, to care, to connect, could alter the trajectory of multiple lives. He'd been counting $17 and change, thinking he had nothing to give. But he'd had everything that mattered. Compassion, humanity, the willingness to see someone else's pain and sit with it. And that simple gift had created miracles. If this story reminded you that kindness costs nothing but can change everything, share it. Comment about a time a stranger showed you unexpected compassion. Subscribe to hear more stories about the extraordinary power of ordinary human decency. Because sometimes all it takes to save a life or change one is 20 feet of courage and 5 minutes of caring. The next person you see crying might be your Victoria. The next struggling parent might be your David. What will you choose?